If you're learning wood turning, do you ever get confused by the lingo and vocabulary? I know I did when I first started, and I'm sure I'm guilty of using that lingo here in these videos too. So let's work on clearing up some of that confusion today. Today we're going to tackle what riding the bevel means when I say it or others say it. So I'll meet you at the lathe. Generally, when we're wood turning, we've got two methods to remove material. We can cut with a cutting tool, kind of like this skew chisel, or we can scrape with this round nose scraper. Today, we're going to be focusing on cutting and slicing using cutting tools that have a bevel, like the skew chisel. Ultimately, we're going to use both cutting and scraping when we're wood turning, so we need to know both. And sometimes, just to make it confusing, sometimes we use a tool like our skew chisel or even our bowl gouge for both actions. So we can cut and slice with these tools, but we can also use them as scrapers. Today, we're going to focus on how we use these tools in a cutting action, and more specifically, how we use these bevels that our tools have to help us get good, clean, efficient cuts. And a lot of times, you'll hear this referred to as riding the bevel. I think it's easier to demonstrate how the bevel and the cutting edge work together using the skew chisel. And we're going to start with the lathe off. When we're cutting with a skew chisel, we want to present the cutting edge right here of our tool at roughly a 45-degree angle to our cylinder. So I've got a perpendicular line all the way around our cylinder. And I'm just going to engage the lower part of our cutting edge. I'm just going to hold it right here, and you can see with that cutting angle, with that bevel rubbing, that bevel's riding on the back side, it's riding on the wood, and I'm engaging the lower part of the skew chisel. If I get up here on the tip, I'm going to get a catch, so I want to cut with the lower portion, and you can see how easily we can remove this material, and we're just turning this by hand. Now let's kick on the lathe, and you can see the skew cutting in action. So we're getting nice stringy shavings right off the bottom of that tool. And one of the benefits of using a bevel cut is how smooth the surface finish is. So this was a scrap piece that I used in a different video. And here I was cutting over here on this side. You can see all these different radial marks. I did this with a spindle roughing gouge, just getting this down to a cylinder. You can see over here on this side, using that bevel from our skew chisel, how nice and smooth the finish turns out. So that's one of the big benefits of cutting using our bevels, is we'll get a very nice smooth finish in most cases. So while we've got this spindle here, I'm going to make a couple V-notches, and let's take a look at how we use a different tool, how we can use a bevel supported cut to roll a bead. With our spindle gouge. Our gouges also have bevels and our cutting edge. So we're going to, while we've got this here, we're going to we're just going to roll a bead right into these V-notches using a detailed spindle gouge, and we're going to engage the bevel angle on this tool, which should give us control of the tool as we're rounding this over, but it should give us a nice finish as we complete that cut. So I'm just going to come in here and about the midpoint. I'm going to engage my gouge. So I just lift up, and I want to cut on one half. I'm going in right there. So I'm using the bevel to guide that cut down. So I start my cut, and I just roll it over. Start my cut and roll it over, and I keep that bevel I want to keep the tool, I want to keep the bevel engaged all the way down in. If I lose my bevel contact, or if I lose my cut, I just want to pull the tool away and start over. But you can see here how effectively that cuts. We get nice, crisp, clean shavings off there. And if we stop the lathe, you'll see how we've got a really good surface finish on those cuts. This bead's a little wobbly, but you can see there's very little sanding that we need to do using that bevel with our spindle gouge. So let's put a bowl blank on the lathe and let's take a look at using the bowl gouge and bevel supported cuts with it. With our bowl gouge, there's a couple different ways that we use our bevel angle to help us make cuts. So I'm going to show you the first one here on the exterior of the bowl. So this blank is still in kind of rough shape. You can see we've still got kind of a flat spot here. I've done a little work on it so it's not too wobbly here on the lathe, but it's going to bounce around a little bit. What I'm going to do is come over here on the edge, and I'm going to start my cut over here, and I'm going to let the bevel get engaged, and then once I do, we're just going to go straight across here and get the outside of this bowl nice and round. I've stopped the lathe so you can kind of see what's going on here. So the bevel is riding right down in here, right in this little notch. And our cutting edge over here on this wing of the tool is going to slice off the rest of that material. Back behind here, you can see, maybe hopefully in the camera, you can see how rough these cuts were, these roughing cuts, and how smooth this is back here on this edge. So using this method, it gives us a chance to remove this material pretty quickly and efficiently. I'm really not, right there I'm cutting, I'm really not putting any force anywhere. I'm just holding the gouge. I'm holding that gouge on the tool rest, that's all. Ah. Had a chunk come off there. Let's see what that was. Just like we made that cut here on the outside of the bowl, we can also use a similar method to use our bevel angle to cut in and get a nice smooth face across here as well. So let's do that. So I'm doing the same thing. I'm just bringing my tool in. I'm letting the bevel kind of rest on this space. And that's going to give me a nice smooth cut all the way in to the center for the most part. I should get some nice shavings. This is not a real aggressive cut, but this is very similar to how we would go about hollowing the bowl, and we'll show you that also. That's given us a pretty flat surface here. This is going to be the bottom of a bowl, and then we've got the outside in pretty good shape other than this part out here that broke off. Another way to use bevel supported cuts with our bowl gouge on a bowl is to shape the outside of a bowl. So basically what I want to do is work down here where the foot of the bowl is, and I want to work off this corner out here to the outside rim. We're actually going to start with a little bit of a scraping motion, and then we're going to sort of shift and transfer into a bevel supported cut all the way up the outside. So once I get out here, now I can get the bevel engaged and I can remove that material much faster. So this is a roughing cut. We're not going to get a really great finish here. With this type of cut, the best person to learn from is actually Harwood or Stuart Batty. They've got this method down. I'll see if I'll link to one of Ashley's videos. If you've never seen that, it's really impressive. So now we've got this bowl blank flipped around and it's time to hollow. So we'll use some bevel supported cuts while we're hollowing also. The first thing we're going to do, much like we did on the bottom of the bowl, is to get this face nice and smooth. You can see it's still got some jagged marks and it's pretty rough from when it was cut with a chainsaw. I like bevel supported cuts like this when I'm roughing. Worst case scenario is you come along and the wood bounces the heel of the thing off like that. Sometimes when you're scraping on an uneven surface, it's easier to get a catch, at least in my opinion. So we're just using this cut right here, using our bevel to get this pretty flat and smooth. So while we're hollowing, we can also use bevel supported cuts. And I'll show you what that looks like as well. So here we can just come in, use our bevel right down into the center and just keep working our way down. Now the way I have this gouge ground, with the swept back wings and the angle, I can only go so deep on this with this gouge. And so when I'm using this gouge, I eventually will switch over to a scraper in the bottom of a bowl. As you can see, we've got a lot of hollowing we can practice with here on this bowl. If you want to see how I use these bevel supported cuts and scraping kind of combined to form tenons and recesses to use with my scroll chuck, check out the video right here, and I'll see you there.